Hello everyone, we recently got info on the third week of beta changes for patch 6.0, and if last week was going to the top of a roller coaster with the addition of the new Nod-Krai residents and overall buffs to every character, this week is rushing back down the roller coaster because pretty much every character coming in 6.0 got an overall nerf, with Flins and Lauma taking the biggest hits. The number of actual kit changes was just a few, but the changes made have significantly altered the characters and teams' performances, so I wanted to quickly go over what exactly happened in this week of beta and how the nerfs affect the overall strength of the 6.0 characters. First, Aino is the only character whose kit didn't actually get touched other than some wording changes, so congrats to Aino, she managed to emerge out of this week's beta relatively unchanged. Second, Flins had his damage numbers decrease on his elemental burst. The final phase lunar charge damage was decreased, which refers to his standard burst which you don't use, so it's kind of funny that HOYOMiX is nerfing his normal burst again just to further tell you to not use it, despite its cool animation. But the significant number change is to the thunderous symphony damage values, which both got nerfed. This is Flins' special burst, which is his main source of damage since it is considered lunar charge damage, and remember that direct lunar charge damage gets his final value multiplied by 3. Thus, nerfs to this multiplier means that Flins' personal damage takes a somewhat significant hit. Flins' C1 did get a buff to give him 1 additional energy now, but that obviously doesn't counteract the nerf to his burst. Third, Lauma's skill received a significant damage nerf. The press damage and one-hit hold damage changes don't really matter as their damage scales off attack, and Lauma is an EM scaler. But the important multiplier nerf here is to the 2-hit hold damage since it scales off EM and is considered lunar bloom damage. Because Lauma's hold skill had a high EM scaling and there's one instance of lunar bloom damage, meaning his damage was increased by any lunar bloom damage buffs, this ability allowed Lauma to do a pretty significant nuke of damage. Unfortunately, the decreased EM multiplier means this ability does significantly less damage. On top of that, Lauma's previous best free-to-play weapon option, the 6.0 event weapon, got a massive damage nerf. Before, it had an EM substat and gave even more EM after using an elemental skill. It pretty much just gave 405 EM, which was really insane. Unfortunately, but expectedly, they nerfed the weapon by giving it an energy recharge substat instead and also decreased the EM you get after using a skill, further decreasing Lauma's hold skill personal damage. As a result, Lauma's best 4-star weapon for damage is now looking like the Nod-Krai craftable catalyst, but with the hold skill damage nerfs, it now may just be better to forget about Lauma's hold skill nuke and just build EM and enough ER to burst, so the new 6.0 event weapon with the ER change is still good on Lauma. Hoyo also changed Lauma's particle generation. The average rate of particle generation hasn't actually changed, but the new rate now has guaranteed particle generation, preventing the scenario where you get really unlucky. Lastly, HOYOMiX nerfed the Nod-Krai resonance buffs that they added last week to the overall moon sign mechanic. As a reminder, the Nod-Krai resonance mechanic activates when you have 2 Nod-Krai characters on the team. Then, when your non-Nod-Krai characters use their skills or bursts, they grant the team a buff to lunar reaction damage, and this buff scales with a stat depending on their element. Previously, the max lunar damage buff you could get is 48%. Now, it has been decreased to 36%, so a slight nerf. They have also changed the stat scaling values to account for this, so the necessary total stats to max the buff for a team hasn't changed except for Geo. You don't need as much defense now. Since many Nod-Krai teams have 2 Nod-Krai characters to achieve Ascendant Gleam, and thus have access to the Nod-Krai resonance, this change means a general minor nerf for many Nod-Krai teams. Now, the biggest question you're probably wondering is how bad have the nerfs affected Flins and Lauma specifically, and are they still strong? For these update videos, I have referenced Vomfi's calcs, so to stay consistent, I will reference them again. As always, he has updated all his calcs with the new changes, and if you're interested in more detailed TC, I highly recommend checking out his Twitch channel for live calcs or following him on Twitter for prompt TC updates. Based on his early calcs, Flins received a 7 to 8% team DPS nerf. I've seen other calcs where this number is closer to 5%, but the numbers are overall similar. If the previous range of DPS for his best teams were 100 to 110k DPS previously according to many calcs, now the range is about 95 to 105k team DPS. So overall, Flins is still a strong DPS. For Lauma, it's a little bit more complicated as on top of incorporating the new nerfs, Vomfi also changed a lot of his bloom assumptions, further decreasing the theoretical DPS numbers for Nilou bloom. Despite this, Lauma is still looking like a strong Dendro support for characters like Alhaitham and Nilou, especially when considering these calcs are single target and Nilou bloom for instance is inherently an AoE team. But as an important note emphasized by Vomfi, bloom assumptions are hard to gauge without in-game testing, so keep in mind that Nilou bloom calcs are very subject to change. So while as always there's a lot of doom posting when when nerfs come in, both Flins and Lauma are still very strong characters even with the nerfs. In fact, you can very easily argue that both of these characters were too strong before and needed to be nerfed in order to slow down the continual power creep in Genshin. And the main reasoning for this is that both Flins's and Lauma's best teams are not yet complete and will almost certainly get buffed with the upcoming new Nod-Krai characters. Flins's current Hydro support is currently C6 Aino, which isn't a very hard bar to surpass with her limited supportive capabilities. Thus, assuming Columbina replaces Aino in this team, Flins's teams will get another significant buff with her release. Columbina may also do the same thing with Lauma teams, but Lauma's main missing team slot is the main DPS. Lauma has buffs to Lunar Bloom, but there isn't a Lunar Bloom focused DPS yet. With Nerf being Dendro and likely releasing in 6.1, it is very likely that she will be the key to completing Lauma teams, thus buffing her overall strength. And lastly, even if we ignore the potential of future characters, Flins and Lauma will still be strong in 6.0 regardless of their theoretical DPS because the content will be designed to favor them. For instance, in the next Stygian Onslaught, we are getting two new bosses. One of them shields Bloom, so Lauma, and the other shields Electro Damage, Lunar Charge, and Electro Charge, aka Flins. So even if Flins and Lauma get nerfed again, they will still be strong characters and will be the best units for the patch. This is the reality of Hoyo's current design philosophy. There are a few more weeks of beta, however, so there might be some more significant changes in the upcoming weeks. If you want to continue to keep up to date with these changes, I highly recommend subbing to the channel for the latest beta news with TC influence analysis, as well as character guides once beta is over. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or like the video if you enjoyed. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.